Okay, the purpose of this recording is to hopefully help someone else out that may come into the problems or some of the problems I did with an older Dixie chopper and the manual clutch as opposed to the electronic clutch. And I looked around YouTube and couldn't find anything, and I'd like to think I'm reasonably mechanically inclined, but I spent a lot of time trying to figure out what was going on. So that's the purpose of this video, to maybe help somebody. Okay, a little bit of house cleaning before I go over to the vids that are involved with actually getting the chopper fixed. Okay, your make and model. Okay, I've got a model X-Ray Golf 2503, and it's a 50-inch deck. It was purchased back in the fall of 2005, so I've got almost 20 years on this thing. Now the hour meter just turned over to 1,000 hours. I think the thing runs a little fast from my way I've timed it, but we'll go with 1,000 hours. Now the 1,000 hours is on the chassis and the deck, and the mechanical components such as the hydro pump and the motors and all that. I changed the engine some time ago, and as a side note, I got one of those Generac engines on it and it blew. I didn't blow it, it blew. I took care of the oil and changed it regular and the whole bit. You can go out and look on the internet. It did not treat me well. Okay, now moving forward here, just so you can see it a little, maybe see it a little bit better. You know, it's an X-Ray Golf 2503 50-inch deck. Now, something I want to bring up with this, and I can't remember the exact year models that are involved and all that kind of stuff. But there, as you may or may not know, Dixie chopper sold out, and then the company closed it or whatever, and somebody else bought it. I think it was Ag that bought them, and they're supplying parts and building the choppers. Thank Jesus they're supplying parts. Okay, there were, I think, like 2 years there of models that were manufactured that they didn't keep up in the electronic records as diligently as they should have. And there are, you know, you can get the manuals from them and all that, but the part numbers don't register in the system. Let me give an example here. This part right here I bought from them. I don't need it, but I bought it. It's a mast, and that's where the triangular plate sits on for the manual clutch assembly with the 2 pulleys. And I'm going to have video on that, but the point of this is an example. I was at, and this is a little shout out to Premier Ag in Whiteland, Indiana. If you're in Indiana, the parts guy up there is fantastic. Okay, that part number, whatever it is, I didn't pull it up. And I've got the original manual, as I showed you before on that. It looks weathered, but it's not. Here we are. The color didn't come out right. It's not that brown in actuality, but that is the original manual. I got 2 of them, and that one came from underneath the seat. But anyhow, dealing with this part, whatever that part number is, a bunch of these part numbers for this, like I say, this donut area of a couple of years there, a bunch of these part numbers do not show up on the Dixie chopper at the, or whoever owns it now, on the Dixie chopper websites or parts persons that you may get up there. Because I looked at it on the screen at Premier Ag, and that part number came back blank. But this guy knew what it was, and he just went in the back and got it for me. So I also ran into a little bit of that when I called Dixie Chopper on some stuff a few years ago. I think it was after the second company had bought him or whatever. And the guy was pretty good and worked with me. But he's going, yeah, I got to kind of cross-reference things. So that's just an FYI thing. If you get an inexperienced parts man and he goes to pull up the number and said it ain't there, get the manual showing the part number, or he may have to go in back and look for the damn thing. But they are still making parts. Okay, onward. Now, I know there's going to be a little black screen, but we're going to fix that. This is for whatever it's worth for guys out there. I drew up my own belt patterns. And if it helps anybody, great. If it doesn't. But I wrote my own belt pattern down before I started disassembling things. Yes, they're in the manual, and yes, there's a sticker on the deck. And as far as I'm concerned, they're misleading to the eye. But here it is. I won't go over all of it. Hopefully, if you need it, you can pull a picture off on this. Okay, and that's the belt setup. Let me look here. That's the belt setup from the PTO. And I know I can't mouse click anything here, I don't think. And all the way up through the manual clutch, and at the forefront is the main or the pulley for the main spline up front. Okay, I'm going to give another belt pattern here. And this one is for the deck itself. It was just easier for me to make the damn thing in the event you throw a belt. I'm not that bright, and whenever I pull these belts off and I don't have a diagram, I am screwed. Okay. Now, I'm going to try and recap here, and let me, I know it's blank. I'm going to get something up here. I'll just pull this up. This will be good enough for everybody. Okay. I'm going to give a recap of the video that's going to follow and why I did it. I spent a bunch of hours on this thing. I'd like to think I'm reasonably mechanically inclined, but a bunch of stuff didn't work out. Things just didn't make sense, and I'll go into some of what happened. I had some hardware that was broke, and there was a misplacement of a pulley on the tri-plate, which it houses the, quote, manual clutch assembly. Let me see if there's anything else on here. And I put a lot of hours into it, more than I should have. Things just didn't look right, and then when I found those brackets were broken, okay, that was half the problem. The other half the problem is either a mistake I made on reapplying the pulleys to the tri-plate, or, and I really think it's this, I think they didn't manufacture, or they didn't assemble it properly at the manufacturer. So okay, that's that, and now I'll go on to the video explaining what I did, how I think they're wrong, and how I fixed it. So off we go. Thanks. Test one. Okay. For lack of the correct term, and I didn't look it up, I'm going to call this the anti-sway bars or anti-sway system. It keeps the deck from moving, I guess you'd say, laterally. Unbeknownst to me, when I went through my problems, this pin, these pins are welded on to these upright bars that are indexed 180 degrees opposite of each other. And I have no idea how long they were broke. It was my inability to observe properly as I was doing general maintenance. But anyhow, this pin was gone. And I just went down to the local hardware store and got another one about the same size as the others on the that are fixed to the chassis on the other side. The pin down here on the bottom that hooks to this cross member anti-sway bar, it was cracked and loose. So we pulled them up tight with some shims and spot welded them in. They're both welded in, surprisingly. And I have no doubt that was a big factor in why I was having belt problems, and also it wasn't cutting as clean or as good as it has since I fixed that and had fixed that. So that's a little FYI there that contributes to the rest of the situation on my belt problems with the manual clutch. Oh, and by the way, if you run into these being broken, for whatever it's worth, this mounting plate here is welded to this upper black plate, and that would have to be cut and taken off. Same thing for the engagement rod base. That's all welded in together. Not fun. I guess they figured they had to do that. But I was lucky that this mechanism was not broke or severely damaged, and I was just able to put new pins in there. Alright, I'm going to get into some of what I did and some of what I found on this manual clutch, the manual clutch assembly, pulleys and so forth for engaging the drive belt from the PTO up here into the deck. As you can see right now, or if you can see or understand, this clutch is disengaged. I'm going to throw it into battery. I'm going to engage it and start pointing some things out on here and things I read in the manual. Test 1 on sound. Sorry to do that, guys, and forgive me, there's going to be a lot of unprofessionalism in this video, but I just don't want to take time and edit everything out. Okay, I'm going to deal with the biggest problem first, is that through a bunch of looking this over, hours and hours, and let me say this, I'm not a mechanic. I think I've got a certain amount of mechanical aptitude, but I'm not a mower mechanic. So I'm going through trying to figure out why it's chewing up belts, burning belts, so on and so forth. And I leveled the belts, I leveled the deck, I checked the level of the belt from the PTO up to this clutch assembly, pulley assembly on this triangular plate, and nothing seemed to be right. And then, as I've gotten that other short add-on video, I found out probably one of the major contributing things was the anti-sway bar up front was broken and not hooked to the deck. But anyhow, dealing with this, you may or may not be able to see here, I put original on there. There are 2 holes on this triangular mounting plate, and I firmly believe, and I can be wrong, and I'd be willing to bet $1,000 on this, that as I was going through looking at the problems, this idler pulley on that bolt was affixed to this hole. And I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe it came from the factory like that. Now, I changed one, technically, well, 2, but I changed one belt on here. I don't know when. I'd have to look at my notes some time ago. Could I have not been thinking and pulled this bolt out, which you do not have to do to change the pulley? It would not make sense that I would do that, because I try to watch very diligently to keep things factory original. I may have done it. But, in any event, it was here. This pulley axis was in, the bolt was over here, and it was here. You may or may not be able to see this. I hope you can. Do you see how shiny the top of this pulley is? It was rubbing and going underneath, if you will, the center or the main spline or center spline pulley, and it was rubbing on there. And I had seen that for quite a while, but I thought, well, you know, they put it from the factory like that. It didn't make sense to me why it'd be like that, but I wasn't having any problems out of it, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, going through all the machinations here and spending hours trying to figure out what's going on prior to, as I said, finding that the, and it's off camera, that anti-sway mast or anti-sway bars that are up front here. I just knew this wasn't right for it to be such a close tolerance. It just can't be that way. It just shouldn't be that way. These things should not touch. So I thought, well, this makes no sense, but I'm going to do it. I pulled the pulley mounting bolt out of what I consider the original hole, and they had a second hole drilled in this tri-plate. Thank Jesus. And I mounted it over there, and as you can see now in the engaged area, this thing is, pardon me, a little bit of housekeeping here to keep this going. As you can see, there's 3/4 of an inch or whatever distance between these 2 pulleys, and that's what common sense tells you. That's what it needs to be. They don't need to be touching. They shouldn't be. Now, with that said, some side notes on all this, and if I'm lucky enough to get it on camera and put an addendum to this, fine. As I said, I don't want to spend a lot of time editing and turning this into a 2-hour production like some guys do. I went and bought a new triangular plate and 2 new pulleys. I originally wasn't going to, but I did. I just bought the plate originally, and then I had more problems, and so I got the pulleys. For whatever it's worth, this Dixie chopper has, and it just turned 1,000 hours this week. There's 1,000 hours on this deck, the chassis, and all of these pulleys right in here, and the splines, the 3 splines on here. All of this has 1,000 hours. And I put this back on and re-shimmed the mast over here. I'll get into that. But I put all this back on. I've got a yard that takes me, let's say, an hour and a half. Didn't, and I went and mowed. It mowed out real good, real clean, real level. I don't notice the belt wearing, maybe a tad up here, and I'll get into that, but I think I'm overcritical saying that it wore. Didn't throw a belt, didn't chew the belt, engaged good the whole bit. Now these 2 pulleys, as I said, are the originals with 1,000 hours on them. I've had these out and looked at them. I've had them off of here, and I looked at the originals. For all intents and purposes, there's no more play in these than there are in the originals. As a matter of fact, I think there might be a little more play in the bearing on the axis point on the new one than this one, but I am going to put the new ones on. So there is that. There's that situation going on there. This had to be the wrong hole, and as I said, I changed it over here, and it brought things right back into play. Now, let me see how the camera is. Maybe I can focus in. Let me focus in a little bit more. And yes, guys, I am not a cameraman. Okay, yeah. Let me pull it back out just a tad. So, okay. You can get a little bit better look at the pulleys. This is the idler pulley, or the tension pulley, and this is the dry pulley, the V-belt pulley, and then the idler pulley. Getting over here with the mast, yeah, it's showing up. In the manual that came with this, it states on this older style mast that there is a bushing and a spacer. They're both really spacers, and the bushing on there is probably 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch. And it says to put the bushing and 1 spacer if needed, which is just a damn washer. I put it back on with the spacer and 1 washer, and to me, this pulley looked like it was down too far, that it was off center as far as throwing the belt. In essence, the belt had to go uphill a little bit to get on this spline pulley. Well, I went in and I put another washer in there, and it brought it up pretty good. Now, if I take a side view, which I'm not going to take a picture, this belt is still going uphill, as it were, and not exactly off the center of this idler pulley, but only like 1/8 of an inch, if that. I may put another washer in there when I throw all this back together. But that was also a contributing factor. It had to be. It was down so far. Or I would assume it was. And maybe there's enough tolerance in here, it really doesn't matter. But I know putting the second washer along, 2 washers and 1 bushing, brought this up much closer to center from this belt coming off of here and going on to this main pulley. Now let me see, trying to think of anything else. Because of this configuration, I may have to tighten this up a little more. The book states that there's supposed to be 2 inches on this spring tension right here when engaged. I'd have to measure it again. I think I tightened it up a little more than that, but it's real close. Let's see if I can think of anything else. Okay. I believe that's it for this configuration and what's going on. And and in conjunction with this, I didn't just put an hour and a half on this new setup. I also have to mow a cemetery. And there's roughly 5 acres, and there's somewhere around, if you will, about 700 headstones that I have to weed eat and go around. And I mowed the cemetery after I reconfigured this. No hot belts, no smoking, mowed out real good and worked. So I've got approximately, let's say I got 5 hours on the 5 hours at the cemetery mow time with this, maybe more than that, and then an hour and a half here. So I got about 7 hours on this of full throttle running, and everything looks to be just fine. So if you've got one of these older ones with a manual clutch, it has, at least on this one, this mounting for the idler has to be on this, I'll call it hole B, or the one furthest to the left, for it to give the right distance here for these pulleys. Okay, this is the new tri-plate mounting bracket and the 2 new pulleys. Yeah, I got a buddy up here helping me now. Come on, move. Anyway, a couple of things about this plate. As I was going through all my unbelievable barnyard antics here to try to figure out what was wrong with that Dixie chopper throwing and blowing, burning belts, I took the old mast and put it on and put a level on here, and I put the new mast on there thinking, okay, is the old plate bent? Is the mast bent? You know, is something bent that's throwing things out of kilter? And oddly enough, this new plate, if you put it on the old mast, well, I have a new mast too, and I checked it out on there, so I put them both on the new mast, thinking that the mast may have been worn. And of course this bushing can wear over time. They both slid onto the new mast with about the same resistance. There didn't seem to be any real appreciable play, if any, in the bushing on the old one. And when I put them both on, I put the mast in a vise, leveled the mast, and then put these on and put a level on it. And the new ones actually got just a shade off plumb on the bubble than the old one. So I think the tolerances are so wide that it just really doesn't matter. Now, if I can turn this here, if you can see, this gives a better image. Pardon me, boys. There's 2 holes here, and I remounted this and then put it on the, and I mounted this bolt that is the spline, if you will, or the axis, in the same configuration it was on the old tri-plate. I don't try to change anything. And there again was some of my problems. When I would take and engage the clutch, this thing wanted to rub up against that main pulley on the center spline. And it even looks like I may have worn a little bit because I didn't turn the mower on, but I didn't run the engine, but I just run the starter looking to see how the belts were configured and so forth. And that was part of what made me look at what's wrong with this mounting. So when I go to put this on, I'm going to pull this out and pull it back over here just like I have in the other video that I showed the clutch assembly. And what else? Oh, one other thing. And if there's a genius out there that can show me how to do it, I'm all ears. Because I looked and tried to figure out how to put it through and this, that, and the other. I know of no way to replace the belt for the power off the PTO going up here to this clutch assembly. I don't know how to replace it onto this clutch assembly unless you pull one of these pulleys. because it's too thick to feed through there, or if I did, I'd damn near have to, you know, cut a relief in the belt to get it in and so forth. If somebody knows of a way and it doesn't hurt it, okay, fine. Put it in comments. I'd love to hear it. But to my knowledge, at this point, you've got to pull one of these to get that belt in there.